I've been looking forward to this, and I like having different people's opinions from like the same place, because you get a very different feel of like, what's happening. But all right, let's get it started. Tell me kind of about yourself. I just told you about me, but I'd like to hear more about you, like your background, where you're from, education and career that got you to this point.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. Grew up here for the most part, less a year actually in the Midwest in Iowa on a grass-fed cattle ranch. And then I actually did college here as well at Hawaii Pacific University, but split half my time abroad in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And then I studied like business and finance, and following that, I took the first job that I could get in the Bay Area, and within a year for a big public accounting firm, and then within a year moved into, actually founded a company way back in the day that didn't work out, and then spent almost a little bit under a decade at kind of seed to Series C machine learning, AI before we called it AI, machine learning companies that were focused on a variety of kind of B2B applications. That was kind of my background, and worked at a number of those companies from, not, I would say, early stage of revenue into, tens of millions of dollars of business. So I came back home in 2021 and co-founded a company called OceanBit in 2022, and then founded Honolulu Tech Week in 2024. And so that's a little bit more about kind of the broad stroke of my background, and feel free to ask me any follow-ups and I can dive in and dial it in a little bit more.
Perfect. Yeah, no, leads right into kind of the next few. We'll start in like chronological order, but tell me about OceanBit. It sounded like a very, from what I've read about it, sounds very interesting, and working with, the ocean and thermal energy. I'm not going to tell your story for you. Please. No. Tell me about OceanBit.
Yeah, so when I came back home, just being kind of within the startup and various kind of like meetup group scenes here, I held like some salons that were focused on Bitcoin and some other area, and met this like really brilliant kind of scientist / chemical engineer, Nate, who had this idea to tap ocean thermal energy and then use data centers, specifically Bitcoin mining, to suck up any of the excess energy not being produced. And so, I mean, Houston has a big energy scene, renewables specifically, like base load renewables that are running 24/7. You have these like, the demand, right, from buyers of energy isn't a flat line. And so Nate had this brilliant idea to kind of pair both ocean thermal energy with a data center to maximize essentially use and utilization of the energy. And so that company, OceanBit's still running. We got the company off the ground. We won our first kind of DOE SBIR, signed our first nation state MOU. And then in 2024, I'm not a super technical, super engineering focused founder, and decided that with both Nate and then our other co-founder, Sam, that, the company, we kind of got it up, running, off the ground and off to the races. And so I stepped back, and then that actually, I was had invested, or I guess written the first check to people that designers and so forth that were working on Honolulu Tech Week. And when I decided to just kind of take a break from the startup world, which I'd been in for 10 years, that kind of led into HTW. So again, I'm happy to drill down a little bit more into OceanBit and what we did, but the whole thing is you can extract huge amounts of energy from the ocean water if done properly, and really, really excited about.
Is this using like the ocean currents, or you said the thermal, so like the heat coming out of, especially like Hawaii's built and very volcanically active area, so.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily from the volcano specifically, it's from the sun, right? So there's roughly 8 terawatts of potential energy that is just in the surface level water. And if you think about a map, it's typically in that kind of like, they call it actually the OTEC, Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion Zone. And Hawaii is actually, it's funny because Hawaii is one of the worst places in the world within that zone to do it. Places like, if you think about Indonesia, if you think about Papua New Guinea, these places have much harder water. And people kind of don't get this, but the way that I like to explain it is, if you've ever been to like a beach in Hawaii or a tropical area at night, it's still warm, right? The water. And so what you're doing is you're taking that hot water at the surface, and you're running a Rankine cycle using the cold water that's getting pumped up as well. It's just like it's a very, very simple process. But it hadn't been done for a while for a bunch of different reasons. And now we think that both the science, both the focus on renewables globally, and also due to the cost curves coming down on major components within deep, essentially offshore oil and gas that are applicable to it, that really over the next decade or two, it's going to be ocean thermal is going to actually get commercialized. So
I like it. I mean, there's plenty of space. So,
yeah. And it just is this huge resource, right? It's this huge untapped resource. Obviously, like, energy is a very tricky industry, and there's a lot of stuff like within it. I mean, ocean thermal energy is less dense, right? But it makes up for in this tremendous amount of volume. But typically energy sources you want more dense, but we're talking about, completely renewable and, again, baseload energy source where it's not intermittent. And so I think I'm really excited about this for the prospect, not only in Hawaii long term, but in a lot of these places that maybe don't have large amounts of oil and gas resources, or that are looking to move to renewables and compare them with some of their oil and gas, like offshore resources. So I think we're like kind of right at the beginning of this commercialization phase for it. So it's going to be a really exciting time for the company. Really excited for the guys and what they're doing. We're just seeing, a number of companies in the space begin to pop up.
No, I love it. It definitely begs an interesting question of, especially since ChatGPT 3.0 came out and really made AI like accessible to the masses to easily understand, easily, be able to use. We're definitely still seeing this boom in AI in so many different ways. And I think one question not a lot of people have asked, especially startup founders, or maybe the founders have, is, what problem does this boom in AI is this going to cause? And I think, companies like OceanBit are solving these problems that, like, because of the success of AI, now we've got a problem of how to cool it all, because of like all the data centers that are going to need to be built and where all that's going to come from in this space. And you see things like Microsoft, I think they just bought, was it 3 Mile Island to build a nuclear reactor to power all of their AI. So,
and that's one of the interesting things, like, about, like, Nate, my co-founder and the CEO's, his invention is that you can use this excess deep cold water, right, for chip cooling. And if you actually look at a lot of the new data centers being pushed, I mean, people are moving to liquid cooling. And so, like, there's a bunch of kind of problems that span up, but generally thinking, like, the way that I kind of think about this is that, like, humanity and civilization, we need to continue to use more energy. It's literally, the marker, right, of human prosperity. We can talk about the Kardashev scales, like moving from Kardashev 0 to Kardashev 1. And so, like, this is just going to continue to happen, and we need to look. And then if you think about AI is like this other super trend. The two go hand in hand really nicely. And so I just expect to see more kind of energy usage overall, and then kind of novel techniques being tapped. And then with some of these renewable sources, novel ways, I think hopefully the promise of ocean thermal longer term is to be able to both power the grid, power independent power buyers, but also have this data center element in. Now, there's a ton of challenges around that as well, but it's something that is I think I believe that we're going to see widespread within, our lifetimes.
Well, I guess you'll do what you do best, and solve those challenges one at a time. So,
yeah.
Perfect. Let's move on to the next one. I wanted to hear about Honolulu Tech Week. I think you, correct me if I'm wrong, you started about a year ago. What was the idea behind it? And yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. And where do you see it going in the next few years?
Yeah, so like back in early 2024, I didn't officially kind of start it until like July of 2024, I think was when I incorporated it, when it became like an actual like, org, so to speak. But back in 2020, late 2023, I had, I'm very familiar with all the people in like the startup circuit here in Hawaii and in Honolulu. And I had a lot of founders that were friends, and I wanted to be able to bring in some of my friends from Silicon Valley, LA, and other places to kind of just really intermix these groups. And then the more I dug in and kind of talked to people, I saw like all these various like sets of problems within Hawaii. And so I should probably start with just like saying what it is, would probably be a better path to go. So Honolulu Tech Week is an annual week of events that are hosted by the leading companies and people within Hawaii's tech ecosystem and tech community. And so if you think about them, it's like everything from panels to pauhanas or mixers to presentations, to keynotes, to even product launches and like AI engineering workshops. So for people that have lived in SF and lived in Miami and lived in LA and New York, you're probably familiar with this whole Tech Week concept. And I just I thought that form factor here could solve some of the problems that I saw within the broader ecosystem. Because we have like a very strong, we have blue startups, we have some, strong accelerators for the early stage tech people. We have some strong people working in education. We have some corporates that actually are very forward thinking, but there wasn't a week to really concentrate all that energy. And so I wanted to just really bring together this entire kind of ecosystem while bringing in people from around the world that are either from Hawaii or connected to Hawaii in some way to share their insights, to educate, connect, and inspire. And so that was kind of the genesis of it. It really July of last year is when, after I had stepped down from my operating role in OceanBit, really started to work on it. We cranked it out in a couple months. And when is this episode gonna air? Or when are you gonna do the cut clips for it?
This one, probably end of this month, early March.
Okay, perfect. So I can say, and the dates, which we'll be announcing later this week, we're going to do it again. It'll be September 8th to 14th, 2025. And we hope to do this every year for many decades and centuries to come.
Nice. I like it, man. I got to talk to your friend Kia Yang, a few weeks ago, and we talked about Hawaii's in such a perfect spot, geographically, where it's right in between, it's exactly 7 hours from California and also 7 hours from Tokyo, Japan. And she said, I think it was Carlo. No, I'm getting everybody mixed up that I talked to in Hawaii. Somebody else told me that, 30% of the population of Hawaii, 30 or 40%, is just Japanese. But there's major influences from Chinese, Indonesia, Korea, California that are all kind of meeting there. Are you seeing, more startup VC having interest moving towards Hawaii? Because just from, being there a few days, it looks to me like the perfect testing spot for maybe Asian products that want to break into the US market, or vice versa.
So a couple things. So yeah, we're very close to we're a 5-hour flight to California. And now with Starlink, it makes it very easy. I actually know people that have told me I normally wouldn't go to Hawaii prior. These are the VCs, the hardcore type A entrepreneurs that are always plugged in. I wouldn't go to Hawaii prior because I lose essentially 10 hours of travel time, and I already don't have that time and that are now coming due to things like, Starlink and the connectivity. So I think, and it is, I think 7 hours to Japan. So we are really like, if you look at a map of the world, truly East meets West, which is actually the name of a conference that Blue Startups are kind of leading startup accelerator host. We also have Elemental Impact, which is another huge accelerator in the climate tech space. We're like East meets West, we're right in the middle. And yeah, we have a huge amount of our population here that has Japanese roots, Chinese, Korean roots, some Indonesian, some Singaporean, and so forth. And then obviously like the US influence and more Latin America as well, specifically in Brazil, which is great for me because I can follow Portuguese. So we are smack dab. With that, I think that, it's an exciting time, but also like there are challenges inherent within that. I think we have to be realistic about. Maybe I'll kind of break down both, if that's fine with you.
Please.
I think the exciting part is I would say that we're really just got out of inning 1 or 2 from kind of a startup / technology landscape POV. And what I mean by that is, we've had companies come out of Hawaii that have gone IPO. We've had a couple, like, a decade and a half now, almost, of kind of serious investors beginning to kind of like look at Hawaii. And we have some VC firms like Builders VC, Startup Capital Ventures, these other like very legitimate funds be here. And I think that you also have this huge influx of tech, let's just call it like tech founders that are beginning to live here. Some of them very, legitimate, like the, Mark Benioffs of the world. There's a lot of guys that are on Kauai. And then obviously we have people in Honolulu. I have multiple friends that have either had major exits or even IPOs that are based here now. And so we're in this like very early stage of like kind of having that right mix of talent and capital. The challenges obviously are like, to a certain degree, in the traditional kind of startup world that I'm talking from. So I do want to caveat that, given that we spoke at the beginning, you have all sorts of companies. From the traditional standpoint is, if you're thinking from a VC or like, a 10,000x kind of type of company, you only get a few of those, right? And those tend to concentrate around, these like network effects of talent. And, there is a certain degree we're competing with SF, we're competing with these other places in pure terms. I like to think about this as more of, I think that Hawaii is going to be very attractive for a lot of entrepreneurs. And I think there's going to be this like bridge building where people do maybe, either use us as a launching point into other markets, East meets West or vice versa. I think part of it as well is just people splitting their, time here. Again, if I'm a Hawaii-based founder, I can fly up to California, run my raise, run my board meeting, come back home. And it's very, very, it's not difficult to do. So I think ultimately my belief is that, with the right talent here, capital will follow. And there are certain profiles of companies that will get built better here. But I just think we're like right at the, right at the inflection point of this blowing up. And there's different things that we're working on right now to make that more attractive. And so, yeah, hopefully that was a really long rambling answer, but I think that there are huge opportunities and then there are known challenges, and it's just addressing those challenges and peeling them back one by one.
I like it. Makes me hopeful. I'm excited to see where Hawaii goes in the next few years. But we'll wrap it up with a fun one. Like I told you before, I'm teaching students and first-time founders at the university. if you could go back to, whenever you were in college or starting your first startup, what's a piece of advice you would want to give yourself or to these first time founders?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's obviously, God, it's such a bad answer. It's highly contextual on the individual. But I think, and it's highly contextual on what type of company that they want to build too, right? Like, I'll give you a couple thoughts and you can clip out and kill whatever you want from here. So the first is, I always like kind of asking, and I'll do this across not just people that are founding stuff, but kind of people's pursuits in life, is why is this the most important thing for you to be working on? You have one life, right, on this earth. Why is it this? And sometimes it is like caveated by at this point in my life or whatever. But if they're trying to build like a massive, like really ambitious company, it also is like, why am I the most important person to be working on this? And I think those two questions are like really powerful, right? Like looking back at like even like OceanBit, right? Like Nate probably definitely is one of the most important people to be working on that. I'm, probably not. I served kind of my purpose, so to speak, right? Sam as well, right? Both kind of ocean engineers, chemical engineers, like just very dialed in for that type of thing. I think that's like just like a really, really critical one. Like, why is this the most important thing? Why am I the most important person? I mean, we could go on for hours on this because I think there's so much like to consider when asking
You're
yourself.
very right in that it's very tough to teach entrepreneurship because, each founder is different. Each project is different. Each industry is different. Each stage at which they're developing it or like where they're developed to is different. So it's very hard to give, such general advice. But I'm also very curious as to, everybody, you tend to hear an answer to this question pertaining to the problems they faced when they started. And, it's always a very interesting one. And I think I lean towards the, go talk to customers because, as a first time founder, that was my biggest mistake is I spent too much time in development and not enough going out there and finding out, who would actually want the product. Or how I could shape it to get it into their hands faster. So now, whether for good or worse, good or bad, I lean way heavily towards, all right, guys, we're going to go out there and we're just going to talk to some customers. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, that's like YC like 101, right? And like, it goes back to that, I want to kill everything in front of me, like being so good. Like there is this like line of thinking, like, Keith Raboy, who's close to the Founders Fund, ex-PayPal, LinkedIn, just like Open Door founder, like, he's like tends to invest in people that don't have like a long track record in their space, but he also does a lot of like consumer stuff as well, which I think makes more sense. I know he does B2B also, but like generally speaking, like I think I'll look at, there's like a lot of people always want to start stuff and like, again, it's like, well, why, right? Am I doing this to like be a founder? Like, honestly, I think the majority of people are better off by working for other people. That may change in like the day of AI, but like, if again, and this is more geared towards people that are looking to build that like massive, kind of massive venture backed or privately backed company, but like that's just like not like for most people, and those companies are far away. I would say like one other thing that ties in, this is actually what I had written down prior that I forgot, but this is going to be my response to this, is really like piece of advice would be like, let the demand like pull it out of you. And so like, again, if you're best in the world at like chips, right? Like Jensen and then the two co-founders, I'm blanking on their names now, like that kind of demand got pulled out of them. If you go to like Nikita Beer terms is like latent demand, right? So like let the market actually pull out. So it's to the point of like, if you are like a good thing, right? A good indicator that's time to start the company is like customers coming up to you and being like, hey, if you just made this, I would buy it. Or if you're doing something a little bit ambitious where maybe you don't have buying customers on day one, having investors come and be like, hey, like we want to like put money into this, right? We'll fund you if you go start it. And these are like just such simple, like if we take ourselves out of that founder role and that kind of like, like I guess ego driven to a little bit of a degree, and just look at anything else in life, that's how we'd operate. But a lot of people, I think we tend to just want to like fill this role, and so it's like, oh, I gotta be a startup entrepreneur and blah blah blah, and like again, tying back to why, but have that demand be there. And I think a lot of the early problems are just solved from that.
I love it. Simple. Always remember the basics. Well, I don't want to take up your entire day, but thank you so much for having this chat. And,
how bad was that?
Finally meet you.
A little bit of rambling. I don't do these interviews very often. I'm not a very good speaker.
I think this is even better. I think if it's two put together, it looks fake. And honestly, if you were if you weren't rambling, I'd be a little worried of did he script these answers? But no, I love this. I really do appreciate it. So thank you for your time today, man.
Perfect, man. Looking forward to seeing you back in Hawaii.